Today, we're going to be covering the top 10 mistakes that newer data analysts make. Now, I wish I knew all of these. When I first started as a data analyst over 2 years ago, I learned a lot of these on the job and working with other coworkers that dealt with data. Think of like DBAs or some software engineers that had to pull data from databases for some of the different projects that they worked on. And so let's get started with number one, which is not knowing your stakeholder. So as a data analyst, you're going to be working with multiple different departments within a company and some of the heads or leads within those departments. Some people love to have visual representation of data. Think of like a Power BI or a Tableau or a Looker Studio or whatever else you use. They love seeing the charts. They love seeing graphs. They love seeing a nice dashboard, and that's perfect, right? Other people just want to see specific numbers and how you calculated them out. So building out a nice dashboard is just going to be a waste of time because A, they don't want it, and also B, you're building out something that will not be used. So this is something that you'll pick up over time throughout meetings with someone, or also just by asking others in your organization. If you're going to be meeting with the COO, do they like visual data or do they just want to have the numbers with a plan of action? And one way this could be solved is by having additional meetings with your stakeholder before the final presentation. So that way you can kind of show like your work in progress of what is being done. And that can help you in a few different ways. One, if you're completely off, you know to scrap everything and start over again. But if you're going in the right direction, the stakeholder might have some more data or other things that you should analyze for the final presentation. And you have that now instead of having another meeting after your final presentation all over again. The third is to not get everything in writing. So today it's really popular to jump on a Zoom call or a Teams call and just have a video conference with stakeholders or different departments when they need specific reports created. No big deal. But after that call, you should send a message, whether it's a Slack or Teams, send an email, and then add a ticket within your project management system. And the reason why you want to have that is kind of as a paper trail to protect you with the work that is being done. And I'll give you a good example from my old job. So sometimes I used to work with the accounting department, about 20 or 30 reports, and the logic would change quite a bit on these reports to make sure our numbers were up to date. Well, the problem is sometimes they would ask for a change 6 months ago. I would make the change and then 6 months later say the report isn't working. Why is that the case? And the change I would make 6 months ago would be the reason why the report's not working. Well, since you have that paper trail, you can say specifically who requested that change and on the specific date, showing that you didn't break the report. Logic that they wanted to add into the specific report broke the numbers. And at the same time, you should also document this report within the code. So if you're making any changes within a stored proc, or if you're going to be changing within a view, make sure you leave some comments on what has been added, comment out old code. So that way, when you do have to change things back in the future, you can easily source that, especially when some of these reports can be hundreds of lines. The next mistake is not checking underlying data. So in a perfect world, databases would have all of the data. There would be no blanks and everything would be inputted correctly. Well, in the real world, that is not the case. Sometimes things are blank. Sometimes the wrong data is in there and it just doesn't make sense. And this bad data can make some of your reports look incorrect. So it's really important to figure out where the bad data is in the database and talk to stakeholders on how you could fix it. So a few examples that you might see at your job. Let's say you had a specific fee that a customer could charge anywhere from $5 to $100. Well, if a customer in the database is showing $130, either there's something wrong with the software or this has been inputted incorrectly. And that $130 can affect some of the analysis they're going to be doing later on within the data set. Another thing that can be wrong is a customer is put into the wrong customer bucket group. So different companies have multiple buckets of customers. If they're inputted the wrong one where you're doing analysis on a specific bucket, they shouldn't be there. Your data is now incorrect. Other times you might have blank values. Big customer might not have any data within a database. Or there's a ton of smaller customers that have a bunch of nulls, or instead of a blank or a zero, someone inputted a space. So you're going to always encounter incorrect data or wrong data within databases. But you're going to have to build out either logic to ignore this or talk to people to figure out how we can rectify the situation. At the same time, with talking to people, you should always check your final data to make sure that is correct. Now, if you're new to an organization, you might want to talk to other people within your data team to determine if the numbers look correct or are in the around the same area. Other things that you could take a look at is previous year's data. Does that also line up? Look at customers about the same size. Does this make sense? Like why a customer A has X amount of dollars or customer B has X amount of dollars. Does that make sense? You could also take a look at a CRM if your organization uses it. For example, my old company used Salesforce, and you're able to check some of the data on Salesforce compared to the database. And you might be able to check other tables within a database. Sometimes there's multiple tables that have similar data or structures, and you can determine if the data is correct by doing that. But always check your final data before you present it. Big mistake that happens on the technical side is not aliasing specific columns. And the most frequent area this happens in is within select statements, and you're going to be using multiple tables. The problem is tables do expand within databases. Sometimes there's going to be extra columns that are added later on after you built a report. A pretty easy example on this is ID. Let's say you have two tables, right, that are joined together. You have table A and table B. And originally only table A had an ID field. So you just put a ID in your select statement instead of a.id. Well, in the future, someone decides table B should also have an ID column because they want to start filtering on that and they don't want to do a join for some reason. Either way, now A and B both have an ID. Your report is now ambiguous for the ID column because you did not say a.id. So the report doesn't know, are we grabbing the ID from table A or table B? So just from the get-go, make sure that you add your specific table alias to it, and that's going to save you a lot of headache down the road. So this next mistake isn't a huge one, but it can definitely hinder your career growth, and that is not bringing up new ideas. See, you're going to be in a lot of meetings with heads of departments, and you're going to be presenting them data that they want. But once you're finished with that presentation, you still may have some extra time at the end of the meeting. And if any ideas in the back of your head or like projects you've been working on with some time off, feel free to present it to them there because it can lead on to a project further down the line. And I know I did a few of these at my old job, especially with how fees were built out. And they're great things to add to your resume after you leave a company. And at the same time, it can show your value within an organization, which can lead to either bonuses, pay raises, or also new titles. The next mistake is not learning about the industry that you're in. So I've recently switched from being a data analyst in a tax software company, which I had to learn, how we charge specific fees, how the customers that we had charge fees to the taxpayers, the different levels of customers, how fees got appropriated throughout different banks and also our own wallet. And it got pretty complicated on that side of things. But now since I've shifted in an industry to working as a payment processor at a fintech, specifically on the risk side of things, not only do I have to learn how the payment processor works and all the different products associated with it, but I also have to learn about risk, which encompasses a few different things like the portfolio of customers, how risky are people? How does the underwriting process work? How do we implement anti-money laundering tactics within the company? So when you get a new job in an industry, you have to learn as much as you can about it. Otherwise, you're not going to be knowing why you're running specific numbers. Or going back to the previous point, you're not going to have new ideas on things to implement. Now, the last mistake is the most costly, and that is not improving your skill set. So for the first year as a data analyst, I skirted by. I got my stuff done with SQL. I had no problems with that. Got my reports done, whatever. And that was it. I didn't actively try to increase my skills or improve my data analyst stack or eventually become a data scientist. Well, that has all changed. So I started teaching myself more complex SQL. I started watching a lot more YouTube videos. I started teaching myself Python. I started practicing some questions online, whether it's like a website like a Scratch or a Data Lemur or Elite Code, just to expose myself to other ways to solve queries. And yes, I know those are more interview queries rather than practical questions that are asked for at work, but you learn new ways how to analyze data and your skills are going to greatly increase. And with better skills, you have new job opportunities out there. And because I've spent a year continually to learn and improve my skills as a data analyst, I was recently able to get a brand new job. And I'm going to be telling you guys that a little bit more in another video. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. And if you want to keep watching, I have a video right over here, which is a full SQL data analytics project. I take you step by step. We use Excel as well as SQL to write some complex queries, and I promise you're going to learn a lot in it.